All right. I think I'm done. Oh no! People wanted me to talk about the Supreme Court, and the honest answer to the Supreme Court thing is, I know we've had some wins, and apparently, I just saw before we did the show, is it Kennedy that's retiring? So Trump will get another appointment. Without doubt, the Democrats will say they can't do it before the election, and they'll have a case. We made that case with Obama and Scalia, but the president makes the appointment, and the president can continue to appoint people, and he should just keep appointing conservatives until finally we get one. And I don't know if it was Kennedy. I think it was. But if it was Kennedy, I don't think he was one of the ones that we thought were on the perch. Ginsburg was the one that seemed to me it was just about to keel over any time. So we got Gorsuch. We will get Kennedy. Trump will name his successor. And very likely, I know that Ginsburg would love to retire, and she won't because she can't stand the thought of having all these liberals dying off. But I don't think she's going to make it. I don't mean that to sound as cold as it is. It's a human being, and I certainly don't wish her any harm. But so he's not a solid lib. He's, as Pershing says, kind of a swing guy. But if you can take a swing vote and turn it into a solid conservative vote, now you're doing well. And if you can take the arch progressive, the one vote that you are always going to get against you, the one vote that you can be absolutely sure of is going to be against freedom every single time, if she goes and is replaced by a conservative, then you're going to start hearing the Democrats calling for legislation changing how Supreme Court justices are appointed until they get the chance to do it again. And this is important because I like to say many times that, we all know we don't live in a democracy, we live in a republic. There are 535 Americans that live in a democracy. There's 435 representatives and 100 senators, and they actually get to vote on what is going to affect all of our lives, like going to war and taxes and all the rest of us. There's 535 of us that live in a democracy in America, and the rest of us just we ask them to do what we want them to. Not terribly effectively, I might add. But sadly, I came to realize I thought that was a rather pithy kind of a observation at the time. Then I realized, actually, that's not even true. We live in a society that is governed by 9 people. Because somehow, somewhere, well, we know how and where, it was the progressive movement at the end of the 1800s and early 1900s. They couldn't get what they wanted through constitutional means. They couldn't get laws enacted by voting on them. People didn't want them. So the Supreme Court went from being something that would arbitrate a result according to law passed by the legislative branch. That's how it's supposed to work. The liberals realized if you could own the court, you could not only repeal laws that you didn't like, but you could have the court rule in such a way that it's making law, legislating from the bench. And so, for most of my lifetime, all of the damage, virtually all of the damage that's been done to this country has been done because this country is ruled by 9 people. They're Supreme Court justices, 9 of them. And they hold our lives in their hands. And it was never, ever, ever supposed to be that way. If the founders heard that the Supreme Court had overturned a law that was passed by the Congress, they would have lost their minds. They would have lost their minds over it. The Supreme Court was never, ever designed to say this law is constitutional, it's not constitutional. No. If it's passed by the Congress, it's constitutional by definition. It's by definition constitutional. Anyway, since we are ruled by 9 people, it would be good if we had 6 of the 9. Because then these bastards can't overturn the will of the people with a snap of the fingers, which is what they do because they can't get people to vote for them. which I just passed one final last little interesting tidbit. What was it? Wasn't packing the quartz. What the hell was it? I hate it when this happens. Just bear with me for a second. I just seem to remember it was worthwhile. See if I can pick up that train of thought. I remember. Here's one last little piece of trivia for you. I love these kind of things. Everybody's heard the expression, if Thomas Jefferson heard about this, he'd be rolling over in his grave. We've all heard it 100 times. He'd be rolling over in his grave. Sometimes people say spinning in his grave, but rolling over in his grave. I realized reading some piece of history where that expression came from. It's an odd expression, right? He's rolling over in his grave. That's not what it came from. It came from this. If you were dishonorably buried, if you were a person of ill repute, you were rolled into a grave. They rolled you into it. They didn't lower you into it. They rolled you into it. So being rolled into a grave was a tremendously bad and upsetting thing. So what we're really trying to say was he wasn't rolling in his grave. That's how most people say, oh, Jefferson would be rolling in his grave. The actual term would have been Jefferson was rolled into his grave. He was so dishonored that they rolled him into his grave. I love things like this. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love finding out where expressions I've used my entire life come from. The whole 9 yards is one, and all of them. They're just so cool to find out. Everybody uses these things because we know what it means, because we understand it contextually. What did you do? Did you resign? Oh, yeah, man, I gave him the whole 9 yards. I gave him what the hell does that mean, the whole 9 yards? There's a couple people said it has to do with the amount of like solder or something on a dump truck. No. 9 yards was the length of the ammunition belts on the 50 caliber machine guns that most American fighters had during World War II. Each one of the guns, a Mustang had 6 50 caliber machine guns, 3 on a side, and each one of those guns had a belt of ammunition with a certain number of rounds in it. And as it turns out, each one of those 6 guns had a belt of ammunition that was 9 yards long. So when somebody said, so you got somebody in your sights, did you get him? You said, yeah, man, I gave him the whole 9 yards. It basically means you have emptied your gun into the guy. You've given him everything there is. I gave him the whole 9 yards. The whole 9 yards means every single bullet we had on the aircraft we shot. Gave him the whole 9 yards. I love those kind of things. I love them, love them, love them. All right, it's time for me to go home. Oh my God, we're almost approaching historical levels here. We haven't done it's almost 3 hours. We haven't done a 3-hour show in, man, a year.